Welcome to a new season of Geopets. This is Steph Fuccio, and I am back for another micro season. This season, we are talking to expats who grew up with one or more immigrant parents in their household. And the central question that runs through all four of these episodes is, did that immigrant perspective, that immigrant in their household, did they impact how our guest maneuvered their expat life later on, like years and years later, people, like decades later? Did that impact them? And if so, how? And that's what we're investigating this season. I'm so glad to bring back Alison Macheski. She has been on the podcast twice already and talking about different things. And now she's going to help us dig into this. Alison studied some things in her master's program that also dipped into this area. So I can't wait for you to hear the information that she's going to share with us on that as well. Look, we go into all kinds of things, from her Chilean mother and the impact that the two cultures that she grew up in the household had on her during and after her time at home in the U.S., and all the places that she has been to, all of the racial bullshit she's dealt with and seen happen around her, even in academia, and what she thinks of all of this and what we're capable of being and doing as human beings that we might not be living up to yet. Alison, welcome back. This is your third time on Geopats, but with different themed conversations that we've had over the years.
Yeah, everything on your podcast applies to me, so I keep showing up again.
Fantastic. Well, that's a good sign that I'm hitting on some very needed expat-y kind of things. Or something like that. Or just my lame excuse to keep talking to you in video version, because I adore speaking to you.
It is nice to chat.
But last time, let's see. Okay, wait. Last time we were talking about Thailand, but you were not in Thailand. You were in...
I was in Prague last time we spoke.
That's right.
I was in Prague starting grad school at Charles University, and I think I was starting to learn Czech. I think I was settling in and sort of comparing my life in Prague to my life of the 5 years previous in Thailand. So congratulations to me. I have a degree.
Congratulations to you.
I graduated. I finished grad school. So now I've got my master's in international economics and geopolitics.
Wow.
And so on topic. And then I moved to Mexico. Well, sort of fell into Mexico as a result of the pandemic. And the hope was to go somewhere further into South America. But for the time being, I'm here in Mexico. I've been here for over a year, and this is the plan. Going to stick around.
That's amazing. And last time we talked, I was in China still, I think. Yes. And then I went to Germany, a few different places. And right now I'm digitally nomading in Rome, Italy. Which countries outside of the US have you lived in?
So I grew up in California. I studied abroad during university in Madrid, Spain. I lived in Ireland for a year in Dublin. I lived in Bangkok, Thailand for 4.5 years. I had some short stints in the Philippines, in China, in Turkey, and I lived for 2.5 years in Prague, Czech Republic. And now I've been over a year in Mexico. You
grew up speaking Spanish, right? In a Chilean American household?
Yes and no. Right? I spoke Spanish with my family, but we didn't speak it a lot at home because my mom, as an immigrant from Chile, was discriminated against when she went to the U.S. in 1970. And so we spoke English 100% in our house, and she obviously spoke 100% English at work. So the idea was that us kids, my older brother and I, would be as American as possible, as blending into, assimilating to the major culture, the majority culture as much as possible. So I spoke Spanish with my family, understood Spanish, but it took me a lot of years of study, of linguistic study, all the way through, from middle school, high school, university, and beyond. I've always been studying. I'm still learning. But yes, this is the first time I've been in a country in 9 years, where I arrived and was able to speak and understand upon arrival. And it is such a huge difference.
Yeah.
As far as, arriving, feeling comfortable, knowing how to get the things that you need. So I'm liking it and enjoying it. And I'm learning a lot of Mexican slang. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm making a note to ask you that later. Was one of your parents immigrant? Because I'm not sure when to call. I might actually leave that in there because I'm not sure when to stop calling someone an immigrant. Like, Are they an immigrant for the first 20 years and then suddenly they're a citizen? Is it when they actually get their documentation?
So my mom was from Chile and my dad was from the U.S. and he came from a Polish American background, Chicago area. My mom was from Copiapó, Viña del Mar, Chile, and she married my dad and they moved to the U.S. in 1970. My mom was an immigrant. She didn't become a citizen until shortly before she passed away. So she was a green card holder for 35 plus years. So she was an immigrant. She called herself an immigrant, but her idea was to leave Chile, move to the United States with her husband, my dad, and have a life there.
Did you just say she called herself an immigrant the whole time, or did she stop when she got that documentation?
I think she referred to herself as an immigrant, but I do think that the rhetoric around being an immigrant or migrant work, I don't think she would have identified with that. But I don't, growing up when I was young, we didn't use those terms really.
Yeah.
We, in her case, she was a resident. She had a green card. She mostly referred to herself by that title, being a resident, U.S. resident.
Gotcha.
She was still very proud to have her Chilean passport.
Right.
She was always excited to go home and visit family. We were on the phone with family every weekend. So I think she really clung on to her identity as a person from Chile. And in the United States, she, I think, always felt a bit of an outsider.
That's interesting that you said that because my parents my dad moved to the U.S. from Italy when he was 12, the story goes, and my mom when she was 21. They had me when they were 35 and 9 years younger than that, whatever that is, math-wise. And I always grew up, I never thought of them as immigrants or as Americans because they were so adamant about I'm Italian that I just thought, you're Italian. And I never really thought about any of that. I knew people thought they were exotic or weird or amazingly different, depending on the mood and the class of the person judging them. But I never really thought of any of that until I moved abroad and met people who were staying longer than I was in certain places and all that kind of stuff. So it's a newer, sticky word for me.
But I understand because I grew up across the street from an Italian immigrant family and my best friend growing up, I mean, their last name is Spartolati. So they also identified that way as being Italian. So I didn't find it that weird until I was in school with kind of more mainstream white American families of German and Scandinavian descent. And then I kind of started to realize that I was different. But growing up, I went to school with a lot of people who were from immigrant families. Certainly my elementary school was, a lot of people with Mexican heritage. And so I didn't notice the difference.
When you say you realized you were different, what does that mean? What did you feel you were different? How did you feel you're different?
Well, I'll be honest. I assumed I was white. I just grew up thinking my dad's white. My mom had pale skin. I just said, oh, I'm white, just like everyone else. And even in school, when you read those books as a child about white children and black children, and I classed myself as white. It took me until, honestly, high school, college to realize that I'm not white and people don't treat me as if I'm white always.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I assumed I wasn't until I moved to California and everybody started treating me like what I saw other people being treated on the East Coast. And then I went, wait, but I just moved 3,000 miles. I'm the same person I was yesterday. And y'all are treating me very differently.
The demographics are different. And
those
so all
guys
of a sudden you identified as something different. This happens every time I move countries as well.
Yes. And when I moved to Asia, forget about it. They were like, your parents are not from the US, you're not, like, they were just thoroughly confused that there could be any sort of ethnic confusion in my brain. Oh, but describe when you move countries, how that changes. That's an interesting bit.
So, for example, when I went to Ireland, I was there during the census in 2010, and I received my census survey, and there was no box for me because it had either white, in parentheses, Irish. They had traveler, which is a type of white nomadic community in Ireland, kind of like the Roma, but much more established and usually of white Irish background.
Okay.
And travelers are considered not white and not Irish. It's very odd. And so that was on there. And then there was Asian, which includes South Asian, more or less, for Ireland and the UK. And then, there was Black or African descent. None of the boxes fit me. There was Native American, which, if I can say that how many generations ago there was a percentage of, indigenous blood in my family. Yes. But obviously I don't typically check that box. Yeah. So in Ireland, I would say people sort of treated me the way I was treated when I lived in the Midwest, which is not white. And people would meet me and say, "What are you?" And "Where are your parents from?" and questions like this. When I lived in Asia, people perceived me as either white or Middle Eastern. And when I lived in Prague, people perceived me as some sort of non-white. Now I'm in Mexico and I'm sort of treated again like a white gringa. So it changes everywhere I go based on the local politics regarding race and ethnicity.
It's so bizarre. I have such a kickback, knee-jerk hatred for the word white. Like, what does that even... And Caucasian almost even more so, because I never would fall into Caucasian.
Yeah.
If it was a strict term.
And for people like us who have experience living in Central Eastern Europe, we know Caucasian is really referring to...
It's really a people,
group of people, and it's not white people from the United States.
No, definitely not. And it's definitely not folks from Southern Italy with super dark skin, which my mom had. Like, it's just like, what? No, that's not. And 23andMe tells me
Southern Europeans are really seen differently than the North and Western white Europeans. So,
yeah. And that was, there's so much to unpack with that. The East Coast is such an interesting mesh of prejudice. It's beautiful and crazy all at the same time. Yeah.
And completely, like you said, completely different from California.
Yeah. It was bizarre. Like, when I first moved to California, people started talking really bad racial shit to me about the people around me. And I'm like, whoa, what are you doing?
Would be okay with it.
I'm not in on this conversation. I don't want to be on this side of this. This is weird. You're being awful. Other than feeling that you were different than some of your classmates at some point, did your mom... I know she did. It sounds like she wanted you and, your sibling.
My older brother.
Your older brother. She wanted you to assimilate and to be American and that kind of thing. But did you feel like you knew at an early age there were other ways to do things or other cultures, or did you have that cultural lens that she had at all?
So I definitely grew up with that tension of being raised in between two cultures. My parents disagreed on nearly everything about child rearing, about the way things should function in our house, my family had political discussions at the dinner table. And though they were both on the liberal side of the spectrum, they had different ideas about what is acceptable in society. And these all came from their cultural backgrounds, obviously. And so unfortunately, what I grew up with is a sort of superior and inferior dynamic, because whatever matched the United States culture, which is what my dad was brought up in, was seen as American and normal. And whatever matched my mom's Chilean culture and, everything that comes with that, language, behavior, societal expectations of women, things like that, were seen as inferior. And so I got a lot of this, maybe even social theory would call it maybe Orientalist or colonialist type of thought process. And I got a lot of that from my parents and their interactions. So my dad was always seen as right because what he said agreed with mainstream US culture. And what my mom said was wrong and backwards and, decades behind and this kind of thing, which, as a child, you really soak in. And this fed into some feelings as a child that maybe I didn't value my Chilean culture as much. I didn't value speaking with my family and learning Spanish as much as I should have early on. And I think even my mom on a personal level, on an individual level, felt really shut out because everything that she grew up with and knew and valued was being put down, and acceptably so.
I know it impacted you and it created your core self and all of that. But when did you become aware that all of this had happened? Because as children, it impacts us and we act this way and we think this way and we're accumulating our viewpoints of the world, but we don't really know it until later. When do you think you realized that this all had happened?
So I think I just sort of adopted and soaked in those thoughts from my household until about my teen years. And I'm going to say thank you to those Spanish teachers that I had in middle school and high school, because this was the first time that culture was presented to me as things that had varying subjective value. I had a teacher in 7th grade from Mexico, and she said, this is what we do in Mexico, and this is what we celebrate, and these are the things that we value, and this is what the home looks like. And I know these things are generalizations, but it was the first time that I saw that what my mother thought and said was just a different culture. It wasn't wrong. And so I think through learning Spanish and being able to understand, as you know, linguistically, where things come from and cultural issues that pop up in language, I started to have a lot more respect for the other half of my culture, which is from Chile. And I started to see it as a separate, subjectively valuable culture that I could also embrace and that I could live between.
Oh, that's really powerful. Were you able to, because that's intense. Were you able to tell that teacher at that time the impact that had on you?
No, absolutely not. I think it was just little things that I was picking up on through those classes, and year after year having classes with teachers who were either from Latin American countries or had lived in Latin American countries, and explaining culture in a way that was neutral instead of in a way that was right and wrong in my personal house.
That's so powerful. And I think that's something that gets lost, not just in the US, but in any culture where people try to assimilate so they can, function in a society. But to be able to keep part of your own culture and still function in one at the same time is difficult, but man, it's so necessary. To completely assimilate is almost impossible. You have to give up everything that you were before you got to that new place.
And it causes a lot of stress as a child, to think that I had one parent that was always right and one parent that often was wrong. It caused a lot of unneeded stress. It caused a lot of, bickering and arguing between my parents. And so I don't even think they understood the meta situation. And if they had, they would have explained it to me a lot better. But I think nowadays parents get this and they are purposefully raising third culture kids. In my case, it just happened the way it happened. And I don't think it was very fair. And so I've spent a lot of my adult life reversing some of those ideas that I clung on to in childhood.
There was zero talk, from what I understand and remember, there was zero talk about this in my household. But I've been teasing this out my entire adult life because each country I go to, like you were talking about, things change, and I feel the need to reevaluate it from that perspective. And it's a mind trip. I'm glad I was exposed to cultures in an early age, but having a bunch of them inside of you is tricky.
When they're inside of you and it deals with your core identity and the way that you see yourself, and the things that you value in your life, it's really hard to incorporate things from two different cultures because they just don't jive.
Yeah.
They don't agree. So you have to hold disparate thoughts, incoherent global views, and you have to value and honor them at the same time. It's extremely difficult.
Extremely. And this is why I love talking to you about this, because you so completely get that and can articulate in a way that I never can. And it's just, it's so stinking hard. What was your first expat place? Was it Spain, the first place that you lived outside, not just traveled?
Yeah.
Do you think having that kind of cultural complexity made it easier or harder to go abroad at first?
I think it made it easier. I will mention that my mom did not want me to move abroad. She did not want me to study abroad. She was very kind of, in Latin culture, people like the family to be close to each other, not far apart. There's not a lot of that value on individualism and going and making a life for yourself. She really wanted me to stay close to home. So against her wishes, I went to another country, the same as she did when she was young. So for me, I think it made it easier. I was really excited to go experience something different. I had grown up visiting, not a lot because we didn't have the money for it, but we visited Chile 3 or 4 times during my childhood. So I had that frame of reference that things didn't work the same way. There were different items in the stores. People spoke to you differently. I had all of that in my background. I was familiar with it. So when I went on the study abroad program, they did a big spiel about reverse culture shock and missing home and how you might hate the new country and how things don't work the way you expect. I didn't have any of that. I loved it from day one. I was just stuck in with all of the ways that things work differently, the different foods, the different music, the different art. I was really happy. I never was homesick. I just didn't have that crisis that they kept saying was going to happen. I just was happy, excited to learn how things worked, and not excited to leave when the time came.
And has that, or after Spain, has there been any place that it kind of, we're marked explicit, that it bit you in the ass? Instead of it being easier, it became harder because of who you are. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but I
think I know what you're saying. I'm going to say that living in the Czech Republic was not my favorite experience. And although I'm happy to have finished my graduate program, I left immediately afterwards. And I think the Czech Republic is a really homogenous culture, and they're quite proud of that. And, you know, to a certain extent, there's an alt-right extremist xenophobic element that is in their mainstream and accepted in Czech society. And for me, it made it extremely difficult just to be there because, like you said, when people feel that these things are normal, they talk about them in daily life. They declare them as if they are true and not a subjective opinion about what culture should be. And so I had a hard time being in a country like that because not only as an outsider myself, but I was studying in an international program, people from Kazakhstan, people from Senegal, people from Mexico, and to hear, not just in the streets from acquaintances, but also in higher education in the classroom, to hear from graduate professors, things that I would consider xenophobic.
Whoa.
It's hard. It's hard to swallow.
Yeah.
And so I think having a cosmopolitan worldview can make you more of an outsider when you go somewhere like that.
Yes, it can. It most certainly can. Wow. Part of me wants to ask, screw it, I'll just ask. Is there anything that in the academic setting that was said that you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. I had a professor who was one of the administrative staff for my department. And this was in the International Economics and Geopolitics program. And we were addressing immigration one day in class, and he announced that Australia's immigration rule about not allowing boats to land and turning them away was the best immigration policy on earth. And that disallowing immigration altogether is the best. So at this point I laughed out loud, and he became irate and said, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "That's a really extreme opinion in the world, and it's not something that you should say as if it's objective truth."
Yeah.
As a professor in academia.
Yeah.
And he got really upset. And as a result, I had problems in my program with him and with other administration for the rest of my time.
It's hard. Okay. I have to admit, by the time I left China, I did start to think, between watching what was happening in the US and watching what was happening in different countries around the world, I did start to ponder if we're not meant to mix together. I prefer diversity. Please don't get me wrong. I like learning about different people. I like having different people. That sounds so weird. I just like people. I like learning about different cultures, different ways to view things, different foods, yes, please. Yes, a lot. Right. But I just don't. A lot of my adult life has been meeting people who just can't handle different.
Yes.
And I just feel like societally, we're not mature enough to be together.
I hear where you're coming from, but let me come at it from the geopolitical angle.
Yes.
Westphalian nation states, that being homogenous nation states that have only one national identity and that have a national language, if not official default, and that believe that the society all share the same culture in common, is something that has existed in humanity only since the 1800s. Wow. So since the treaties of Westphalia, that is when we started to say things that now are really considered typical parts of the neoliberal world order, meaning every country is sovereign. No country from bordering or outside areas have a right to interfere with their national politics. And that countries have a right to group together around a shared identity and to kind of gatekeep that identity using national borders. This is a relatively recent modern creation in human history. And so I hear where you're coming from, and I think that has been socialized into us. All of us were raised with an idea of national identity, and patriotism is injected into our education system. I grew up saying I pledge allegiance to the American flag. I think this is socialized into us, and it is less than a couple hundred years old. Before this, monolingualism was unnatural, was not normal. There were people across not just Europe, but across Africa, across Asia, across the Americas that were intermingling, trading with various different cultures. And it was normal for people to be multilingual. Our brains are made for this. This is how we do it. But we typically in human history used to do it from an early age, and it was quite normal. And nowadays we grow up, because of nation states, we grow up in a monolingual society. And that's why people have sort of closed minds. And that's why we have, especially in the United States, a country that doesn't travel and that less than 30% of the population has passports. We have a really low tolerance for multiculturalism. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. It almost sounds like the unnaturalness that we've done with like settling down and farming, that we've just gotten out of our natural tendencies by acting like this. I had not realized it was that close in the past. That's ridiculous.
I learned some good things in grad school.
You did. You most certainly. You just used your degree. Check. You're done for the year. But it's true. It's very, very true. And actually, in large portions of the world now, multilingualism is still the norm.
Yes.
It's just in developed countries, we think that sticking to the one is a really good thing. And it's like, why do we think that?
And
why?
it's not a coincidence that some of the people, let's look at Europe, that the people who receive the most discrimination across Europe, which are nomadic people like Romani communities, are the most discriminated against because they are the people that go against this ideology of nation state, of monolingualism, and of unified national culture. And it makes sense why they're treated so horribly by mainstream populations across Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying is that our cultural complexities actually used to be the norm. And it's just, we've acculturated ourselves out of them. And so 200, 300 years ago, we would have been fine. Like, not feel weird, not be ostracized for being strange or having multiple cultures in us, that kind of thing.
I mean, ever since the beginning of empire, we have to realize that when all of us learn about the Roman Empire, Holy Roman Empire, we learn that this is one of the first instances in human history where on a wide scale, people are forced to adopt language and culture as a part of being conquered. And so when empire comes into play, and when empire becomes colonialism, becomes neoliberal economic colonialism, we are still running empires. And this is why people like me and people like you are made to feel like outsiders, because I don't belong 100% to the mainstream culture of the empire that I grew up in.
And that's what's crazy to me is, especially pre-pandemic, there was so much movement and so much movement, like immigration movement, and so many mixed kids. I hate the word mixed for a person. It's so weird. It's weird enough for animals, like a mixed breed dog. It's like, it's just a dog. I mean, a person's just a person. It's weird, but it's even weirder for people. But all of these mixed kids that we were creating, it's just a weird thing to say. Anyway, yay, but then they're going to have even more complexities going for, it's hard. I don't know where I'm going with that. I
think when we go back far enough, we realize that there is no pure culture. This idea of pure culture, pure identity, pure blood, pure race, this is all pseudoscience. Yeah. And when we look at, I can look at my own family and say, I'm a mixed kid, right? I come from the result of a multicultural relationship. These are terms we haven't heard since the 80s. So you look at that, but then I look at my mother and I see my grandparents, and I know that's also in Chile considered a mixed couple. Right. My grandfather was shorter and much darker, and my abuelita was much lighter and taller. And so this in Chilean society was considered a mixed marriage. And I look at my father, and he came from a Polish American background around Chicago, and his parents were, one was Catholic and one was Methodist, and that was considered a mixed marriage at the time. And one was of English background and the other of Polish background, who, the Poles were not the welcome community for a while in the U.S.
Yep.
So there's no pure, and frankly, when we look at purity, I think of royal families intermarrying, and
then there's a whole bag of bones.
Purity is kind of
too close. Yeah, it's not good either. Genetically, it's very not good. Yeah, it's just creepy. Anyway, let's get back to the cultural part of our experiences. Spain, Ireland, Thailand, the Philippines, Turkey, Czech Republic / Czechia, and now in Mexico. Do you feel like having had that upbringing of knowing that there's more than one culture has helped you as an expat, has made it harder, or somewhere in between, depending on the day?
I think it's helped me by far, because I have had that ability since I was a child to move between cultures, to fit in different cultures, and to feel, in some senses like I belong, in other senses that I don't belong and that I'm not welcome, but I always fit a little bit. So I had that experience, and I knew that going into another culture, there will be people, though I may not fit into the culture and I wasn't raised that way, there will be people that I get along with. I understand that people have a variety of personalities and preferences within the culture, and there's a spectrum of adherence to the main culture. And so I feel like it helped me. I also had the benefit, or well, we'll call it a benefit for me, at least, that my mother was very vocal about not feeling that she belonged in the United States and having the reverse experience of going back to Chile as an adult after many years in the US and feeling like she didn't belong there anymore either.
Yeah.
So, after years, decades, you lose the slang, you lose the speed to speak, you lose the comfort with the culture. And she became really Americanized and really felt comfortable in US culture. And there were certain aspects of US culture that she preferred. And so going back to Chile, she didn't feel comfortable in every situation and was vocal about this feeling and how awful it was.
Yeah.
So I knew that this would happen to me. I knew that there would be things I liked and disliked about every culture I experienced. I knew that I would have that reverse culture shock about liking more or disliking aspects of my own country.
Yep.
So I was prepared for all of that. It was not a surprise or a shock. And that's what I think I can thank my mother for, because, it was unfortunate to see her have those experiences and feel really bad about it. But I knew that going in. And so I was never taken aback.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Have you been back in the US for a long stretch and had that reverse culture shock yourself?
No, I haven't. I actually went to the US once last year for one day. And I hadn't been back since 2013. Yeah. So when I was in the US, there were a couple of things I noticed that I sort of already knew, but noticing them and seeing them was shocking. Number one, it was during the pandemic, and a lot of people were not wearing masks, even in enclosed areas. And I was shocked, especially as someone who has lived in Asia, that people care more about their personal comfort than community safety. That was something I knew, but had sort of forgotten because I hadn't lived in a society like that in a while. I also was in San Diego, and I was in Chula Vista area, and was shocked at how big the roads were and how big the cars were and how nobody was walking. I was on foot, and I was alone in the street. And it was kind of shocking that everybody drives everywhere. Because since I left the United States, my priority has always been to live in walkable neighborhoods, and it's been extremely easy to do outside of the US.
Yep. It's so interesting you say that, because since the pandemic hit, my husband and I, it's been such a struggle for us to try to find a place to cement ourselves in Europe. And we keep looking, keep revisiting going back to the US, and keep honing it down to the places that we start with public transportation, and now less pollution, and, less crime, and all of these things that weren't as big of an issue when last few times we lived there. And I just keep coming back to, we need to get a car and I need to drive everywhere. And that goes against so much of what I've built up in my adult life of not wanting that life. Yeah.
Walking everywhere and having a walkable life is a huge aspect of the improvement to my standard of living. And it's not something that I'm willing to give up to move back to the United States.
Yeah. Ditto. Well, yeah. I can't say never, because things are still persnickety, but I'm resisting like crazy. I'm moving every 3 months instead of just going back there and being in one place, because it's such a nightmare to not have good public transportation.
Yeah. And it ties you to a place. So once you get used to being able to pick up and go, the idea of having a car and an insurance bill it's a lot. It's a heavy burden.
And it's feeding into the whole gas economy thing. And it's just, there's so many sides to it that it's just I wasn't into that way before I left, when I left, and I certainly don't want to go back to it now.
And in the United States, I've never been in a socioeconomic position to live in a city, as far as live in a location in a downtown of a major city in the US where I could walk everywhere. There are places that have fabulous transportation, but I worked in San Francisco for 2 years and I couldn't afford to live there. And I still couldn't.
I could, and I could if I did. I didn't do anything other than just live there and work. So it's like my main, like, huge chunk of my salary went towards my very, very tiny room in somebody else's apartment. But it's very restrictive in the US. Even when there's public transportation in that downtowny area, to get anywhere else is very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Not great. Not great. Okay, let's end on a slightly positive note. If folks go, oh my gosh, she's brilliant, I want to see what else she's doing in the world, is there any like website or social media space where they can follow what you're doing?
Sure. They can find me on Instagram or on Twitter. My name is Alison A. Glitter. ALISON AGLITTER. It's a very old username and it is not my last name.
No, it is not. Alison, seriously, thank you so much for coming on for the third time. I think you are the guest I have had the most on the Geopath, so I'm super excited about that. Yeah.
Thank you for having me, Steph. It's always exciting to talk about these things with someone that understands.
Oh, and boy, do I understand. And so do Chelsea and George and myself and even Melissa, who's interviewing me in the last episode of this season. We all understand, and that's what is making this season so intensely special for me, and I hope for you as well. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode of Geopats, I hope you do one of two things. One is to either subscribe or follow either the YouTube channel that you're watching this on or on your podcast app. And the second thing is to pass it on to one other person. If you know someone who would appreciate this kind of conversation about how our identity and our upbringings with immigrant parents shapes us in the future, please do forward this to even just one person who would enjoy it. And I'd really, really appreciate that. I appreciate you for making it this far into the episode. You can reach me at Steph Fuccio on Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. That's STEPHFUCCIO. Thank you so much, and we'll be back very soon with Chelsea and her immigrant parent expat influence story. All right, bye.